Team PokeColors family, welcome to the channel. How we doing? How we been? Today, I'm going to be talking about PSA population reports. What is it about populations that gets people all in a fuss? We're going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about something I discovered with vintage that might be a possible play that you can work towards in terms of investing in vintage graded cards, specifically the non-chase cards. But without further ado, let's get right into today's video. So I have this stack of slabs right here. I was waiting on some of them to come in the mail before I made this video. So before we get into that, do me a favor, hit the like, hit the subscribe, and check out the links in the description. I wanted to showcase some of the cards that I bought by mail. One of them being this Chimeko. And what's really cool is I didn't pay that much for this guy. I mean, he's an EX reverse, and I was watching Pokebeard's video, and this is kind of what prompted my discovery with some of these cards that are vintage. But let me just put some tally marks on the screen here for you guys to see. So this Chimeko here in a PSA 9, okay, there's only 24 of them in a PSA 9. Kind of wild, right? In terms of PSA 10s, there's only 4 of them. So we're looking at this card right here, the Chimeko Delta Species Reverse with the stamp, EX Reverse from Holland Phantoms, has only been graded a total of 42 times. Wow. And to think I have a PSA 9. So think about trying to track down a 10. If you're a collector like me and you want a PSA 10 of this card, obviously you could grade one yourself, but that's very difficult because of the possibility of it not grading a 10. Could have graded 9 or even lower, like 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All of the above. Or all the below in this case. So if you're trying to track down a 10, that's basically next to near impossible. I mean, unless you know somebody that has one, like there's rarely any sales on eBay. So in my eyes, looking at this PSA 9, I almost consider this a PSA 10. Not that the grade says it's a 10, but because of the scarcity of this card in this graded format, in a 9, there's only 24 of them. And I just so happen to own one of them, which is awesome. But to think about trying to track down a 10, that's next to near impossible in my opinion. And the best part of this is, this card I only paid $25 for. So imagine buying a vintage holographic reverse stamped EX foil for basically I mean, it's $25, right? And I have no problem sharing that. You can go and find it on eBay. I really don't care. But to get a PSA 10, to pay for a 10 if you find one on sale, you might be looking at like $80 to $100, or if it's a more popular Pokemon like Charmander, Pikachu, some of the more desirable Pokemon, you might be looking at a bigger purchase, like over $100. But for a card that's not as super popular, and a PSA 9 to be only $25 when the scarcity of the 10s is so low, like, I mean, I don't know. You tell me in the comments, what do you think? Like, what would you do? If someone came up to you and said, hey, I have this card, it's a PSA 9, but what if there's no 10s? What if there's no 10s? What if the PSA 9 is the highest graded card because A, it hasn't been graded that much, or B, there's just no grade higher. So then you're basically looking at a PSA 10, essentially. So that's just one point that I wanted to bring up. And just because it's a low population doesn't necessarily mean anything. You could have a low pop card that's only graded 10 times. Technically, like, I don't know what constitutes between low population. Like, I consider 100 probably the cutoff for low population, I think. So in this case, this card's been graded only 42 times. So technically, anytime you grade this card up until 100 times total, it's going to be low pop. So if you see people on eBay selling cards like this one that might be quote unquote low pop, but it's really not because it's only graded like 10 times, like, no crap, no duh, it's going to be low pop. You've only graded the people in the world have only graded this card 10 times. So that's just one example, and I'll put that in the back for your viewing pleasure. Let's move on to another one. This is just a little fun fact that I discovered, and you'll see what's coming up next in the slab stack here. But this one right here, this one I just bought as well. Same price, $25. This is a PSA 9 Claydol holographic foil from 2005's EX Deoxys. Okay, $25 for a vintage foil. Are you kidding me? I will buy this all day, every day, over and over again. Now, granted, there's not a lot of vintage collectors out there right now. A lot of people are invested in modern. A lot of people see the value in modern, especially the sealed modern, because that's where all the eyes and the scalpers and the money's at. But if you're a collector like me, who doesn't necessarily want to play into every hype play that's out there, like Prismatic and Journey Togethers and, you know, upcoming Destin Rivals with Team Rocket, like, you know, there's a lot coming. We've got Megas coming back. If you want to play on to building your collection with unique, specific cards, like I'm trying to do with these vintage bangers, follow this video. Use this as a guide. So this one right here, I paid $25 for. Total population graded of this foil, 136. Okay, which is a little bit higher, obviously, than the Chimeko. But PSA 10s of this card is 23 total, and a PSA 9 is 68 total. So a little over, well, actually, that's pretty close to half of the graded cards are 9s. So yeah, like, there's a lot more 9s of this card, which is fine. I didn't care. But to think, you know, there's only 136 of this particular card graded ever just baffles me, because PSA's been around for a long time. Pokemon, I mean, you could have graded this card the day it came out in 2005 and held it if it was a PSA 10 or whatever. So there could be copies out there of this card that are that old, but this one actually has a relatively higher cert number. And for reference, you know, 2020, 21 was around the 5-6 range, because the next slab is when I graded it. So this was graded after the 2021 boom, which is really interesting. And I wish there was more data to kind of show, you know, the influx of graded vintage cards after that time period, because that might influence, you know, how many there are out there on the market, as opposed to, you know, sitting in someone's attic, you know, collecting dust, or in someone's safe, you know, just sitting around. So there's Claydol stats for you. Very interesting. Very interesting. Now we're going to take a look at the big dog. Okay, this is, as we know, one of the most graded cards out there, vintage speaking. Like Charizard, the Pokemon itself is graded a crap ton. So for reference, okay, 42 or 46, 40 something total grades. Claydol, 136 total. Okay, Charizard base set, 72,271 total. Are you freaking kidding me, brother? 72K. And of those 72K, there's only 489 10s. So obviously a PSA 10 is going to fetch a pretty penny. And in this case, I have a 7 that I graded myself. Shout out PSA grader for giving me a 7 and not a 6. But moving on, PSA 9s of this Charizard card. And this is the specific 1999 version, not the 1999-2000. So it's first print, I believe, if that's, you know, first print, not first edition, obviously, but first base set print, non-first edition, unlimited print, right? This one has 8,000 PSA 9s, has 13,000 PSA 8s, and 12,000 PSA 7s. So obviously the numbers are skewed a little bit, right? Because it's Charizard. Everybody loves Charizard. Base set Charizard. That's all that people talked about for the last 5 years before Modern swung in and took its throne. But, you know, Charizard is king, as we've seen from recent Modern sets with Charizards in them. So comparing this Charizard to some vintage foils that you could get, you know, back in the day, not as old as the Charizard, of course, but still relatively vintage, you know, time frame. If you consider EX vintage, I do. I don't know that it's really mid-era anymore. I think mid-era is kind of in the black and white XY at this point. And as time goes on, vintage will continue to grow, because the mid-era range will shift with the timeline, I believe. So there will be a time where, you know, double the time that Pokemon's been out, we're kind of in the middle. Imagine, you know, 30 years from now, when the 60th anniversary rolls around, Scarlet and Violet will technically be considered mid-era because it's shifted with the timeline. That's kind of how I think about it. But moving on. Charizard, of course, 72,000 total times. This one, Charmander, PSA 9, Pokemon Center stamped version. This guy, modern card, only been out for 2 years, okay? This card has been graded 3,763 times. 470 PSA 10s, and close to 2,000, where it's 1877 9s. All right. So compare this card, which is an illustration promo you get in every ETB. If you bought the Pokemon Center version, you got the stamp, you got the, you got this card per ETB. So it's not that you have to pull it from a pack, it's just guaranteed, right? Compare that total quantity of grades, 3,700, to our original 40-something and 136. Dude, this card's been out 2 years and it's already 10 times graded as much as these vintage cards, these two right here specifically. And this is worth more. Isn't that wild? Like, think about that. These cards have been out for decades and they've only been graded a couple hundred times, if that. Chimecho's been not even graded 50 times total. So if you have a Chimecho that's minty, you could go for a PSA 10 and be one of the 5 people to own a PSA 10. Or grade this card, you could be one of the 500 PSA 10 owners. So for me, I'm kind of trying to refine my collection and look into, the more of the statistics side besides the artworks, which I love all of these artworks, but the stats are really fascinating because there are some EX reverses on the market in PSA 9s for sub $50 that are, technically PSA 10s because they have no population that's higher. There's been no graded 10s ever because either they're not graded that much, they're not that easy to grade because the condition's awful, or nobody's grading them outright, which seems to be the majority of the case here because Chimecho's only been graded 46 times. So last card I want to highlight here, another vintage card, and this one's a little bit older. I graded this myself recently. Magneton from EX Fire Red Leaf Green, another early 2000 set. This is a reverse foil. Beautiful card. Total population graded of this reverse foil, 156. And of that, 25 are 10s. There's 60 PSA 9s, 42 8s, and 16 7s. So 7 isn't obviously the best grade you want to get, but this card has been graded 156 times. Isn't that wild? So what does all this mean? I'm going to tell you. Personally, I think there's a beautiful moment right now because everyone's focused on modern, everyone's focused on getting the newest hot modern set card, that plays can be made in the market, not only with vintage PSA 9s, graded cards, but just vintage cards in general. Because, there's a lot of people that have these sitting around at home in a binder that they don't necessarily care about, but they want that new flashy Journey Together ETB, or they want the, $2,000 Moonbryon from Prismatic. So what I've been doing is just looking for really neat cards. And granted, I'm older and I grew up with these cards, so I do have some bias here, but if you're just entering the scene and you are younger, that's cool too, because there's going to always be people that will like the vintage, and as time goes on, the vintage bubble will probably expand, right? Like, that's only natural. And some of these older cards that are considered mid-era, like 10 years ago, like EX era, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, those are going to be considered vintage at one point. So pretend this isn't Claydol, and pretend this is a Charizard base set, PSA 9. Would you buy it for $25? Heck yeah, you would. Especially with the possibility of it going up a lot in price. Now, granted, it's Claydol, right? It's not a Dragonite. It's not a Charmander. It's not a Charizard from this era. But people like certain Pokemon, personally. And some people like certain foils. Some people like certain gimmicks with the stamps and the Delta species factor. And, I'm one of those people. And I know there's a lot of people out there that don't really talk about it because everyone's focused on modern. So that's kind of what takes up people's bandwidth right now. But if you go to card shows, there's a lot of vintage out there. Or so they say. I mean, when I went to Pokemon Regionals in Indianapolis a year ago, all the modern was getting bought up and nobody was going through buying vintage. There was a Gold Star Rayquaza that they wanted, you know, $1,000 for, but they couldn't, or a couple, it's probably $5,000. But to think now you have 2 Moonbryons that equal that one, it's like, how many Moonbryons did they make? I mean, Pokemon's printing billions and billions of cards more than they had their entire existence in the last couple of years. So these cards, not only are they hard to find, not only are they not as desirable because they're vintage, but they're also less printed. Therefore, meaning that the scarcity is higher. What does that also mean? It means if you have a 9 and an 8 even considered, you're pretty much looking at like a PSA 10, even though it's not necessarily graded a 10. So do your research, folks. If you like vintage, take your advice from me and look at the population report before you buy a card, because you never know. You might look at a card in a 9 and be like, oh, this one's $25, but heck, there's a couple hundred 9s, couple hundred 10s. You know, it's been graded 3,000 times. Or you might find one like this that's graded less than 50 times with maybe no PSA 10s, and you have a 9 sitting on the lot right there staring at your face for $20. Like, that's basically a PSA 10 vintage grail card. Maybe not grail card, vintage 10 banger card, have you say it. But that's kind of what I've been doing, and I've been stocking up, and I want to get more and just build out my PSA 9 stamped reverse collection, regardless of population report and everything. But it does help. So let me know what you guys think of this video. I know it was a little bit of a longer one, a little bit of a niche specific topic. I might try to do more midweek uploads. So if you like this, let me know in the comments, and let me know your thoughts down below, because I'm always looking for steals and deals, and I'm always trying to help you guys build out your collection for cheaper. So join me on this journey and collecting vintage before the next vintage boom comes around, because it's only a matter of time. People are going to get bored with modern. It's going to be printed through the roof, and they're going to want to crawl back to the vintage cards. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Leave a like and consider joining the memberships. 99 cents. Join up. Gonna do some more stuff. Gonna make some more exclusive content over there, and yeah, help support the channel. Check out the links down below. Buy some supplies from Vault X. Use code TPC Vault X, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Have a great day. Peace.